Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So, on today's live stream, I welcome Leo Den Breejen from Leonardo's Reef. What's happening there, Leo?
Thanks, Keith, for having me. I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. So Leo is in the Netherlands, and right now it is 1 o'clock in the a.m. in the Netherlands.
Correct.
So Leo has told me that he is a more of a late night person than a morning person, I guess. So we'll keep cranking, Leo, I guess, until you start losing some steam there. But I appreciate you staying up late to join us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
So Leo's been around for a while. You know, I think back in the Reef Central days, you were pretty well known with Leonardo's Reef. But just in terms of specifics, Leonardo's Reef, it's an aquaculture facility and a laboratory that's based in the Netherlands, and they provide sustainable aquacultured corals throughout Europe and perform research on coral spawning, which we could certainly talk about. So before we do start chatting with Leo, I want to thank the sponsors of the program, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate these companies supporting the live stream, and I appreciate all you folks out there tuning in to view the live stream. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And as usual, I encourage everybody to drop your questions in the chat, and any comments would be welcome as well. So I'm seeing I'm getting a little bit of a warning from YouTube. If anybody is seeing any issues with the stream, just let me know in the chat in terms of any audio and video issues. This is pretty rare for me to see this warning message. You never know what's going to happen there, Leo, with the internet and kind of hiccups along the way. But it looks good to me, despite the warning I'm getting from YouTube. So, Leo, man, I mentioned you've been a reef keeper for a long time, a well-known reef keeper. You know, I mentioned back in the Reef Central days, your tank was one of the most iconic, I think, well-known tanks around. What? So when did you actually get started into reef keeping? What's your journey been like?
Well, I started having aquariums when I was 5, but obviously that was just freshwater. My first reef tank I started when I was 16, so that's 24 years ago now. And yeah, I was still in high school, living at home, but I basically did everything that was possible with freshwater. In the end, I got like 7 different tanks, 7 different biotopes, all in my little bedroom. And I thought, okay, what is the next step? What is the one biotope that I didn't try out yet? And that was like the marine biotope. So that's how I started reef keeping. Very, very primitively, if I look back at it now. A lot of leather corals, the big, thick fluorescent tubes, yeah, it was even a time before any stream wave pumps. It was just the old block pumps we used for flow, a small skimmer with a wooden air stone inside, and it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I with a few short breaks, I never really stopped reef keeping ever since.
Yeah, it's a great hobby. You mentioned breaks. I've taken a couple of breaks myself. It's kind of like hard though. After you take those breaks, you're just kind of itching to get back into it.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, going from high school to university and studying, moving out of my parents' house, those moments, sometimes a reef tank is just too much. But I never stopped more than, I think, 2 years,
Mm.
because it was just such a big part of my life. So I couldn't stop for more than just a short while.
Yeah. No, it's something that's in the blood. It seems like, so it's kind of tough to shake the hobby for sure. Um, so anybody that was influential, to you when you were kind of getting into the reef keeping, and somebody that was more of like a mentor, or somebody that you just followed their methods in terms of keeping reef tanks?
Um, yeah. The hobby in the Netherlands where I live was kind of
Mm.
small. Especially, I was at a very early point already looking into the Acropora and the stony corals, and there wasn't a lot of literature or a lot of people that were actually doing that over here. So I was pretty hooked to Reef Central in particular, but also some other boards. And basically, all my information I got out of those, yeah, those online forums. Um, Very influential to me at an early stage was the whole bare bottom
Mm.
movement. So keeping the tanks very clean, very sterile, a lot of flow, not a lot of rock, no sandbed. Um, I really liked that philosophy from a very early point, especially because it was very compatible to keeping Acropora, especially how we thought about keeping Acropora back then. Everything very clean and very low nutrient. That was the philosophy back then. So I cannot remember any forum names anymore, but that whole group that was around the bare bottom tanks was really influential when I just started. But I think everyone that was part of the forum back in the days, probably was very influential to me because I was there every day for, yeah, 4, 5, 6 hours, just reading and asking questions, and also sharing my own tanks, obviously. So it was a very, very nice time, and I think I was very lucky to have started in that period, because right now I think it's much harder to get good information and people
Mm.
that really take the time to explain something in more than 2 sentences with all the social media going on. So I think it was a great time for me to start, and having, very deep discussions with people about certain topics, all on the forums.
So how did you get into creating the company, Leonardo's Reef? Was that something that you were doing part time for a while? I mean, basically, it was like you turned your hobby into a job.
Yeah, I started the company in 2009, so it's quite a while ago already. But it started as something totally different. Yeah, happens more. But I was working in a small local fish store back then, and they had some customers that needed regular maintenance. And I started to do the maintenance for the customers of those of that local fish store. And yeah, at some point that grew into a little bit more customers, and I thought, okay, maybe it's a a smart idea to start a small business, so I can put my expenses over there and have my income there. Um, yeah, so that it started as some sort of aquarium maintenance
Hmm.
company, and I was really thinking about building it out to a bigger one over time. But at some point, I was just tired of cleaning tanks all the time, and I did it next to my study back then. So it wasn't it wasn't really a full-time job. But I thought, okay, this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. Um, and at home, I already fragged corals and sometimes sold or traded some corals. And for those maintenance customers, I actually started to breed some corals to put in the tanks at their house, because sometimes they restarted or they started
Yeah.
over, or I helped customers starting up and actually filling the tanks with the corals that I grew at home. Um, yeah, and slowly that became bigger and bigger and bigger. And about 5 years ago, I made the step to really renting a dedicated space outside of my home to really start propagating Acropora on a bigger scale. And at that point, I also started working less. First, I started working 1 day less, and gradually that became a little bit more. And I currently only work for 2 days as a teacher at the university in close to my hometown.
Wow. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's almost a full-time job now. Very gradually it grew, towards this. Um, yeah, so it has been a quite a long journey. Yeah.
So talk to us about the reef keeping scene in the Netherlands. You mentioned that it's a well, maybe we were talking before the history. I can't remember if you mentioned it was a, on the live whether or not it was a, it's a small market. But I
Yeah.
think you were talking before. Go ahead. Tell me what you were saying.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it
tell us what you were saying to me before in terms of the Netherlands.
yeah, the Netherlands is a small country. I think right now it's 16, 17 million people. And yeah, obviously there are not a lot of reef keepers in this already small country. But luckily we are, we are part of the European Union. So we also have stores in Belgium or Germany that we can go to. It's not too far of a drive. So the community is a little bit bigger than only limited to the Netherlands. But if you look at how many people keep reef aquariums and how much of those people keep Acropora, you have a very
Mm.
small group, but a very passionate group of people that really try to keep and in many cases also propagate Acropora corals. And it's a pretty small community. A lot of people know each other through the stores or fora or shows. We have a show coming up next week in a vivarium, it's called, and a lot of people are also meeting there, and all the stores are represented there. So that are like those occasions that you meet each other in person.
So you don't have a brick and mortar store to per se where people can walk into and buy stuff, or can they like make appointments and stuff? I mean, it sounds like most of your business is shipping to the other parts of Europe.
Yeah, we prefer to ship and sell everything online. But in some cases, people really try to or really want to come over to pick up the corals themselves. So that's always a possibility, but we don't have any opening hours, so they have to make an appointment. We also don't really have the ambition to really having more of a store function, because then you're always limited in your freedom when you can go there and when you can leave, and it's also quite a nice part of having this business, that you're very flexible. Also with the situation at home with my wife and kid, it's very nice that I can be flexible and sometimes go in the morning to do the maintenance and sometimes go in the afternoon or evening. And I would like to keep it like that.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I can relate. I'm the same way. I'm pretty much just ship. Rarely do I have anybody come over, but of course I live in the middle of nowhere, so it's kind of hard for people to find me.
Yeah, but if someone comes over, sometimes I do really enjoy it, because it's also very nice to show people around, and sometimes just look at all the corals and really nerd out about that one small species that you acquired a while ago, and just have a coffee and just talk about corals for a couple of hours. So I do really enjoy it, that people come over from time to time, for sure.
All right, so Leo provided a nice video as well as a whole bunch of pictures, and we're going to start going through that stuff. I just want to touch on a couple of comments in the chat here. Reef site, Sonny, what's going on there, Sonny? Comments for
Hey, Sonny.
the Formosa Forest is a classic aquarium in this hobby, one of my favorites. Let's show the Formosa Forest here. So
that's the first Formosa Forest. I think it's a tank that I started up in 2007.
Is this the Apagon Reef?
No, it's
just the Formosa Forest. Okay, I got it.
It's Formosa Forest. Yes, okay. It's.
So I'm clicking through some of these pictures of the Formosa Forest here.
It's Formosa Forest front and side. There are two photos that I added.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a. I don't know the exact date anymore that I started up the tank, but it's really according that bare bottom philosophy. So there's one small live rock in the middle, and no sandbed at all. And on that small live rock in the middle, I basically glued a lot of staghorn Acropora, and they grew out into a staghorn forest or a Formosa forest. And I added a lot of the small cardinal fish that were hovering in these branches. And I think it was my first full blown Acropora tank, and it's still my favorite tank.
This is the tank that was just so well known on Reef Central. I think everybody, like Sonny said, everybody knew the Formosa Forest, and
yeah,
I dig staghorns, and I don't know. Today it doesn't seem like people are really into staghorns for some reason.
No, it's a shame.
Yeah,
we have to change that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you look at the Formosa Forest right now, you think, okay, it's just another, it's a nice tank, it's a cube tank, it's a rimless tank. But back in the days, first of all, cube tanks were quite a rarity still. I had this tank custom built, but not a lot of people had a cube tank. And second of all, the rimless tank, so the tanks without a Euro bracing on top, was also not very common. So I was really with a group of other hobbyists, really on the forefront of that really clean, almost floating cube of water look. While still a lot of people had those very heavy oak or wooden cabinets, totally closed up aquariums or built-in aquariums. So it was a really modern, different way of keeping reefs, and I think that's why it also became so popular.
Yeah. So a random question from Bert Minshew. Leo, in your experience, what brings out the fluorescent pinks more, like in the Jason Fox homewrecker that tries to be green? I posed this question to Jason Fox also. Higher par seems to possibly be a factor. What do you think in terms of bringing out the pinks more in corals like a homewrecker?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? How to bring out the pinks in the tenuis. I'm always a firm believer in the full spectrum light, which means not only blue or very heavy blue, but also running a lot of more whites and full spectrum light, especially in T5s and halides. But now I sound very old school, I think. But I think those are very important for at least some pigments to really, come out in certain corals. So I would always suggest to run at least a couple of hours of white or full spectrum light every day.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think your parameters and trace elements and everything else also have to be in check, obviously. Otherwise, that full spectrum is not going to change anything.
And we'll dig a little bit more into how you like to keep your tanks in terms of trace elements and supplements and all that stuff and equipment. Let's take a look at, you did a little tour of your facility.
Yeah.
So you put together a video for us on that. Let's take a look at that. It's about what, 3 minutes long or something?
Yeah, about
3 minutes long, and we'll take a look at that. You narrate it in the video, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of like dig into the system. So let's do that.
Cool.
All right, roll the tape.
Hi everyone. In this video, I will give you a quick tour of our Acropora coral farm based in the Netherlands in Europe. First, some numbers. We have 2,200 gallons of systems in total, 1,400 gallons on the ground floor, and 800 gallons on the first floor. The two tanks that I just showed you are tank number 1 and 2, which are connected together into one system. Tank number 1 that you see right now contains mostly frags coming from our mother colonies. We have quite a lot of frags at the same moment because we let them grow for 3 to 4 months before we sell them. This is tank number 2, which need to be converted into a frag tank, but right now it still contains a lot of mother colonies. As you can see, the mother colonies became quite big over time, and sometimes they're shading or even touching each other. And obviously we were trying to prevent that. So on the first floor, we build a dedicated system for our mother colonies. So all the colonies that you see right here needs to be eventually moved upstairs to the new system. At the same time, after moving those big mother colonies, downstairs we have more room for growing out frags. So yeah, it gives us a lot more opportunity to offer more variety in frags, more frags at the same time, because as you may know, Acropora grows relatively slow. So we cannot offer too many frags every week because it's limited by the growth. But the more surface area we have, the more frags we can actually grow. Then one of the most important things, quarantine. We have two different quarantine systems, quarantine number 1 and 2, which are totally separated from each other. Every new acquired coral will go into quarantine for at least 3 months and will get a treatment every week. In between those treatments, we can switch quarantine systems, which gives us the opportunity to disinfect and clean out the other one. So a coral that's treated will never get reinfected by something that's still in the quarantine tank. Then last but not least, system number 3, which originally was meant to be a display tank, but in the end became another tank for our mother colonies because we were basically running out of space. As you can see, there are a lot of staghorns in here, just because we really love staghorns. We don't sell them that much actually, but we love them so much that we wanted to keep them somewhere in the farm. All right, then let's move upstairs to the first floor, to our new systems totally dedicated to our mother colonies, also known as the mothership. The system has 4 tanks, all connected to one sump, 800 gallons in total, and has been only running for a couple of months now. But the whole process of moving the colonies from downstairs to upstairs has been pretty smooth actually. It's now about 75% full, So we have a little bit of room left to move the last colonies from downstairs to this new system, where they have a lot of light, room and flow to grow, hopefully even better. Well, this is the end of the short tour. Hope you enjoyed it. See you later.
And we are back. Apologize. I think the video was kind of a little choppy there. It's the whatever's going on the live stream is kind of messing around with the video playback there, but hopefully we'll be cool. I think it's because, Leo, you sent me so many pictures that I've got. So we got to go through all these pictures here. Then maybe that's part of what's going on here with the technical stuff. But dude, man, that was just amazing. Simply amazing in terms of what you got going on there with Acropora. It's obviously I don't think I saw any LPS in there, did I?
No, there are a few lost LPS somewhere in the back or on the bottom, but not a lot. I think it's less than 1%. Yeah, less than
1%. Wow. Yeah. It. So I saw talk to us about the types of acros you got in there. I saw a bunch of Millipora. You know, obviously, I think I saw not a lot of stags in there, right? Your customers are just not. That's not a high demand item, huh?
Yeah, I have to, I have to keep a balance between the most demanded corals that are just best sellers and the stuff that I just really like myself. But I cannot fill everything up with all the stuff that I like myself, because then I won't sell anything anymore. Because my favorite corals are still staghorns, and in every different possible shape and color and variety. But I decided to dedicate one system, system number 3, to my staghorn corals, and really give them room to grow in there. But over time, that tank also became a holding tank for other colonies, and it overgrew basically everything. But that tank really contains most of my staghorns. I really like to also acquire staghorns from other parts of the world than only Indonesia, because typically you see those mariculture staghorns from Indo coming in. But I like to collect staghorns from Australia, for instance, which are coming from the wild reefs, as you know, because those are very, very different than what you typically see in the hobby, and they're not picked up by many people normally. So sometimes you have very unique species in between them. But I do have a lot of tenuis, Millipora, shortcakes, for sure, because I love them as well, because they have such bold and bright colors. They grow quite quickly as well, and they're very demanded by my customers. Yeah.
Let's go through some of these specific corals here, and I'm going to just kind of read out a number here. So we were talking about this before in terms of trying to do the best way to try to identify each one of these. So Acro 4712, that's a pretty sweet looking acro. It kind of looks like the I'm on the top of my head, but the
golden jaw dropper.
Yeah, okay.
Golden jaw dropper.
We were also talking before the show, like in Europe, really, there's not much of a name game, right? You're more into using the scientific names and not getting into this whole marketing craze stuff, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a name game going on, especially copying the names from the US strains. In some cases, even claiming that it is the original US strain, which could be possible, but then the source could be in a gray area. It's probably not very legal, but I think in many cases it's just not the same strain. So what we try to do is always give the coral the scientific name, or try to ID it as good as we can. And next to that, give it our own fancy coral name, just to make communication with the customers more easy. Because we have, for instance, 5 or 6 different pink Millipora, which are tiny varieties in between. And instead of talking about dead pink Millipora, it's easier to give them a fancy name. So it's much more easy to talk to your customers about it. Yeah, so that's what we try to do.
So all right, 4712 is which one again?
I think it's mostly similar with the golden jaw dropper.
Golden jaw dropper, okay.
In the US, yes. Scientific name, I actually don't know. So if someone knows, please mention it in the chat. But I never could ID this coral positively. No.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yellow corallites and kind of like those rose-colored polyps, man. That's quite the combination.
Oh, sorry. Oh, we're talking about a different coral. Oh. see, now I see it in the live stream. This is called the bumblebee, the yellow with the red polyps.
The bumblebee.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, bumblebee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be Indo microclados, Indo shortcake, but I'm not very sure. But this is, I think, one of the best corals that we have, actually.
Yeah, you sent me a whole bunch of pictures, and I picked out like 11 of them, and I was kind of like drooling over every one of them. I didn't have the time to pull all of them together. What about 4703?
4703. Let me get the right one. Yeah, this is a confetti type coral. Could be just a confetti Acropora, or some in the US have the grape ape coral. Could be similar. We just call it our confetti because, for obvious reasons, the polyps are very, very long and wavy. Has a green base, blue tips with sometimes a little bit of purple or lila inside. Yeah, just a very fast-growing coral. Under blues, the green polyps really stand out. So it's a very beautiful coral to have in your tank, for sure.
It's gorgeous. Well, so talk to us about lighting in your systems, and what are your what kind of equipment are you using to to run these tanks?
Yeah, we use a combination of LEDs and T5s for basically every tank. We have some experimental tanks with only LEDs right now, but that's purely for our own experimentation. But all the growing tanks and also the display tank, which is for growing out the mothers at the moment, has a ATI hybrid fixture. Which is a combination of LEDs and T5s. And upstairs in the new room, the new facility, we have a combination of the ATI SunPower fixtures with the Orfec LED bars. So it's again some sort of a DIY hybrid solution. And the bulbs that we run in the T5 units are, in most cases, a combination of the Blue Plus and the Coral Plus bulbs. But in some cases, we even use the Aqua Blue Special bulbs, which is a very white, even yellowish bulb, which has a very full spectrum and I think very important for coral growth and also bringing out some of the coloration.
So Bert has got another question. Tyree Red Dragon, Smooth Skin, Deepwater Acro. Almost everyone has theirs. Die as they get bigger, me included. I believe it's too high of par. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it could be. It's definitely a coral that should be kept at a little bit lower par, especially under LEDs. LEDs only. But I think flow could be the major issue for bigger colonies. And to really get flow in the middle of bigger colonies, we always try to have a very active wave function or wave motion in the tanks. So the whole water volume is basically moved around all the time, which also means the water in those colonies, in between those branches, moves all the time. And it's much easier to get water to move inside the colony by a big wave compared to a stream of water blowing onto the colony. So it could be a combination of flow, lack of flow, but also maybe too much light. When you give a coral a lot of light, they're also a little bit on the edge of bleaching in some cases, especially when they don't like a lot of light. So if some parameter or you have an alkalinity swing and they already are a little bit light stressed, they can STN pretty quickly, in my experience.
Michael, sure. Hey, what's happening there, Mike? Question to you, Leo. Are you running Tropic Marin system based on the nitrobiotics bacteria?
No, we try to keep things as simple as possible. So we use a lot of Tropic Marin products, the Pro Reef Salt, the full bulling system, so the A, B, and C solution. And the C solution is the sodium chloride-free salt, which maintains the ionic balance for part A and B. And we use the mix, the blend of trace elements, the K plus and A min trace elements, also from Tropic Marin, and that's it basically. So we don't add any bacteria, we don't add any amino acids, and we don't add any extra nutrients in the form of phosphates or nitrates.
No coral food, nothing. You're just
sometimes we add a little bit of Easy Reefs. Easy Reefs has those big IV bags of oily food. They make it in smaller quantities, but we have the big professional quantity bags, and we mix it in with our fish food every day. We do feed a lot of variety in our fish food, which also indirectly feed the corals, obviously. But every day we feed mysis, artemia, but also lobster eggs, fish eggs, small red plankton, green plankton. So we mix in 7 or 8 different kinds of frozen foods, which basically feed the whole tank as a whole, and not only feeding pellets to the fish. We don't feed a lot of dry food, actually. So I think indirectly we also feed the corals a lot, but it's all in the form of frozen foods.
So yeah, it does sound like a pretty simple system. So in terms of calcium and alkalinity additions, you're just doing that 3-part type of from tropic.
Yeah.
Okay. And UV sterilize.
And we have kalkwasser.
You're using kalkwasser as well.
Yep.
What key parameters for everybody out there that's wondering? What are your key parameters at?
Parameters are very close to the Tropic Marin salt, because we do 10 to 15% water changes every week, and we don't want to have too much of a swing. So we keep calcium around 420, 430, alkalinity around 7.5. Nitrates are quite low in our case, below 1. Phosphate 0.05. Potassium 420, strontium around 6 to 8. I think then you have the most important parameters. So it's pretty basic, actually. Not a lot of weird numbers.
So you mentioned you've got some low nutrients. I guess nitrate is pretty low, and phosphate seems like it's right in where you want it to be. How do you how do you manage those nitrates, or how do you manage the nutrient control there?
Well, we don't manage. The corals manage it.
You're using the corals to do the legwork on that stuff, huh?
Yeah, we experimented a while with trying to maintain a certain level of nitrates and phosphates, because when you read about the ratios of phosphates and nitrate, our nitrates is much too low for the ideal value and the ratio between phosphate and nitrate. So we experimented with adding nitrates for a while, but actually our coral growth declined. So the uptake of alkalinity and calcium dropped, and also our colors didn't improve. They actually they became a little bit worse. So we just stopped with adding any phosphates, nitrates, and just we're feeding the tank a lot, we're feeding the fish a lot, and we just let everything run its course. Of course, we are aware that we cannot bottom out the nutrients too much. So the phosphate levels need to be around 0.04 to 0.08 in our case. But the nitrates we just let them do their thing and not really measure them actually. So we only check nitrates once a month when we receive the ICP test. And other than that, we don't really check for nitrates anymore.
And in terms of trace elements, so you're doing ICP testing. Are you making adjustments based on those ICPs in terms of trace element dosing?
No, we don't. What we do is because we have two blends, basically of trace elements. So if most of the trace elements are on the low side, we just increase those blends. But we don't dose any individual trace elements. First of all, for the reason that I think an ICP once a month is not enough to really start adjusting trace elements on. I think it's too risky. I think if you're doing that, you should send in an ICP probably every week. Other than that, some trace elements can be toxic or not useful if you dose them individually. So we think it's a little bit dangerous to experiment with that. So we just dose them in a blend. The blend has a certain ratio that is there's some science behind it. So the uptake should be, roughly the same ratio. So we keep it like that. Sometimes we get an ICP back, and some trace elements are actually zero and unmeasurable, but we're not too worried about it because we know we edit at least a little bit every day in the right ratio, at least in a ratio that's claimed to be the right one. And everything's working out, so we're not going to change anything.
What trace elements that come back at zero that you're not too concerned about?
I only worry about low iodine. So if iodine is low, we add a little bit extra. Other than that, we don't worry about any trace elements being very low, actually.
Who do you guys use for ICP testing?
Right now, I use the ATI testing just because the interface is very easy. The tests are not too expensive because we have to send in like 4 or 5 tests every month. But I also like the fauna marin tests. They're very detailed. They're actually, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah.
We just, we started with ATI at some point, and we're just sticking to it for now. But if I would make the switch, it would probably be for the fauna marin tests.
Yeah, they do have a lot of information that you can really kind of dig into, and I like their forecasts. And I've had Claude on a couple of times, so they definitely have a science behind it in terms of different ratios of certain elements to other elements. So it's definitely a lot of utility in those reports.
Yeah, for sure.
Another question about your lighting, Backwoods Reefer. What does your lighting schedule look like? How long do you run your T5s and LEDs?
Yeah, so the LEDs are on for, I think, in total 14 hours. But you have to keep in mind those LEDs are basically some additional lighting. They don't do a lot for lighting the corals. The T5s do most of the heavy work. And the T5s are on for 10 hours a day. Yeah.
Any thought about going all LED, or are you just really digging those T5s and want to just keep on trucking with the T5? I used to be the same way with middle halide lighting, and I've seen the pardon the pun, seen the light in terms of the LEDs and what have you, and love the results I've been getting. But are you worried at all down the line in terms of the T5 technology potentially getting phased out of the hobby?
Well, I know for sure they're going to be phased out in Europe within a couple of years. I think 2028 is the last date, somewhere in summer 2028.
So you got to have a plan in place then, huh?
Yeah, I already made plans. So.
Are you just sporting all those T5 bulbs? Is that what you're doing? I know a lot of people doing that
Yeah,
here, metal halides.
pretty much. Yeah. About LEDs, I'm like I mentioned before, I run a couple of tests with different brands of LEDs. I'm still not convinced. I think obviously you see it online a lot. You can keep Acropora, you can grow Acropora and color up Acropora with LEDs for sure. But if you look at the surface area that we have right now, if I have to stick that full of LEDs, it will cost me around $60,000 to really getting the same level of coverage as I have right now. And I have to do it very gradually if I would like that. But yeah, it probably works, but the investment is so high that for now we'll stick to T5s as long as I can. And when I really have to, I will gradually make the change to LEDs probably. Yeah.
So is that the plan by 2028 is all LEDs?
Well, probably sooner, but
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, LED technology also improves every year. Right now, it's basically the same as phones and computers were for a long time. So I think if I wait for a couple of years more, the technology will also be better. The lenses will be better. The coverage will be better. So it doesn't hurt to wait for a couple of more years, I think.
Woody's Gamer Tech, thank you very much for that super chat. The question says for both of you, when you place an Acropora and you think the light flow should be good, but it's not happy, how long do you give it before moving it? And the follow-up comment is not happy means minimal polyp extension.
That's a difficult question. When the coral's not happy, and I suspect it's the flow or the lighting, I would move it immediately. But it means I have to rule out other options or other possibilities of the unhappiness first. But if all the corals around that are very happy, but that coral is not, I would definitely move it. But I would also first check for pests, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, for sure.
I have a similar answer to yours there, Leo. I think if you put something in a coral in terms of placing it in the tank and it's not you're not getting that polyp extension, it just doesn't seem to be right, then something is wrong. And I think the first thing I would check for is pests, but or other corals in the tank kind of exhibiting similar signs of unhappiness. Speaking of pests, you showed in your video quarantine 1, quarantine 2. What do you guys do in terms of quarantining your corals? What's the whole process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say we don't do a lot of imports. Most of our stuff, of course, is growing in our tanks for a long time already. But if we acquire some new species, we sometimes handpick some new corals at the wholesale. We put it into quarantine for at least 6 to 8 weeks. And we set up 2 different quarantines because when we treat the corals weekly by external dip. So take them out of the quarantine tank, dip them, leave them in the dip for a while. If you put them back in the same quarantine tank, you can basically reinfect the coral with whatever is or was in that tank or on the surfaces of that tank. So what we do is take out the coral, give them a treatment, and put them in a different quarantine tank.
What treatment do you use? What dips do you guys use?
We use the commercial dips, so the Coral RX. We use the potassium dips. That's basically it. So it's a very, very basic dip, basic dips. We also do a lot of visual inspection. We have some microscopes, some mesoscopes, which can enlarge everything around 30 times. It's like a very fancy, it's not really a microscope, but you can just look up close. So visual inspection is very important. You can check for bugs, check for eggs, check for flatworms. And after 8 weeks of dipping and visually inspecting them and having them in those quarantine tanks, we're basically sure they're all clean and free of pests. Then they will move into our system number 3, which is also separated from the rest. And system number 3 obviously contain Acropora corals, but they're not yet in our tanks with all the frags and mother colonies. So if the coral is doing well for a couple of months in that smaller Acropora system, we feel safe enough to really move it to our other stock. And obviously, because we moved all the mother colonies to the first floor now, we have an extra barrier built in, because we don't want to add, after we moved all the colonies from downstairs to upstairs, we don't want to add any corals to the upstairs tanks anymore. So that's going to be basically a closed door. Nothing comes in anymore, and we have different tools, different hoses. Everything is different than the stuff that we use downstairs. So upstairs is 100% pest free, and it will be pest free forever. That's the philosophy.
Well, that's the way to do it, is to have multiple levels of quarantine to make sure that they can kind of the corals can make it through. How resilient are the corals with the constant dipping?
It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Most corals do pretty fine, but especially the deep water corals or the very fine branch corals are having a harder time. Although I have to say the dips that we use are not the most harsh dips that are out there. I think the Dettol or the more the Melafix dips, but also the iodine-based dips are much more harsh, especially for that type of corals. So most corals will survive, and some won't. But that's part of the deal, basically.
Yeah.
What we do is keep the nutrient levels in the quarantine tanks a little bit higher, so we don't skim anything. So they can build a little bit more tissue, and they become a little bit darker. And the light above the quarantine tanks is also quite dim. So when the corals leave the quarantine tanks, they're pretty much brown, which is better than white. But yeah. They definitely have to color up after that, but we give them a little bit of a calm environment to really settle down from the dipping all the time.
I meant to ask you before, UV sterilizers. Do you guys use them 24/7, or maybe just in the quarantine systems?
Yeah, we use UV sterilizers in the quarantines, but also in all the grow out and mother colony tanks. Not a lot of UV. I think we have different units connected to each other. We have one system with 3 55-watt units, and upstairs we only run 55 watts of UV. But we also run ozone on both systems. So the big system downstairs, big system upstairs. So not the quarantine tanks, also run ozone. So we combine ozone and UV together.
So what's the reason why you guys are running UV? I mean, I know ozone in terms of water clarity, that you're going to get crystal clear water using ozone. What's the rationale for using UV 24/7?
Well, not really for fish diseases, because
Right.
we do have a lot of fish, but yeah, we don't encounter a lot of also we don't have a lot of fish that really really susceptible for fish diseases. But our philosophy is that with such a high volume of coral compared to the total volume of water, there are probably a lot of chemicals in the water that some sort of warfare chemicals that corals use to fight off each other, but also bacteria that are waterborne, or maybe a coral that's dying and releases tissue, maybe in some cases. We just want the water to be as sterile as possible. If there's any disease, any coral disease, or any microbial or bacterial disease, it cannot really spread through the whole system. It's a little bit of a guess. I think it's just a nice feeling, to run UV. It doesn't leave anything in the water, so I think UV is a very safe way to treat the water and to clean the water in to some extent. Same for ozone. If you use ozone in low concentrations, it's also pretty safe to use. And it basically has the same effect. It also sterilizes to some extent. It oxidizes basically. We also run carbon, so we have a lot of different ways to clean the water. Yeah, it's just as a safety precaution. If anything, everything happens in a tank on a bacterial level, it's taken care of.
So, you mentioned earlier that you guys don't dose any, bacteria, and that's a thing that a lot of folks, I know do in the hobby, dosing bacteria. I've dosed bacteria. I'm dosing bacteria, more for nutrient control versus, for more for, anything else. But using the UV, using the ozone, is that one of the drawbacks in your mind in terms of potentially what the microbiome could be impacted by the use of those sterilization methods?
I think most beneficial bacteria that are useful for our reef tanks are on the surfaces and actually not waterborne. Of course, corals also eat those waterborne bacteria in some cases, so bacterial flocculants can be consumed by corals. So maybe to some extent I'm taking out some form of coral food. But the beneficial bacteria needed for nitrification are actually on the surfaces and not really in the water column. So those won't be really affected by ozone or UV.
What about, if you guys have any, RTN, STN episodes, how do you handle that? Have you ever done a, here in the States, we have Aquabiomics, so you could send out a sample of your water and get back a profile in terms of what the microbiome looks like and whether you have any coral pathogens or whatnot. Is there anything like that in Europe? And if so, have you utilized that service to see what you got?
No, not yet. We do have a service here that can, send the samples to the US. So it is possible to test it at some point. It would be very interesting indeed. But if we have an STN encounter, we just basically take the coral out as soon as possible. Obviously, try to troubleshoot and find the source. But we never had a big bacterial bloom or big bacterial outbreak of a coral pathogen. So I think we were just very lucky, or I don't know, but yeah, it would be interesting to see the bacterial makeup of our systems. I do have to say the only thing we do is starting every system with live rock. Also, the tanks upstairs are started with live rock, and we do add 1 or 2 live rock, new fresh live rocks every year, roughly every year, to the tanks as some sort of reseeding of all the bacteria and all the microbial life, which are in those rocks. Yeah.
What about pods and what have you? Do you periodically add copepods and anthiopod? I mean, is that something that you reseed in terms of your systems, pod population?
No, not really actually. We do have some pods, but not as much as we had in our home tanks in the past. I can remember if you look at night on the glass, you would see a lot of those small copepods running around. But nowadays we don't see that many. Maybe we have a lot of fish that are dedicated to eat basically everything that swims around or runs around or crawls around. So we selected the fish in all of our tanks with a specific task in mind. So I think a lot of those copepods are actually consumed, but we never reseed them or add them. No, we don't do that. No.
I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but you also mentioned flocculants. So I've tried this. I know others do coral snow treatments. Is that something that you do in your tanks?
I definitely did it in the past when I still had home tanks. I used the snow, the commercial bottles of coral snow. We also had a local product here that was pulverized, like those stones, those how do you call
Yeah.
zeolites, zeolite stone, which are also capable to take out some ammonia. But nowadays, I keep it very simple. So I don't add a lot. I don't remove a lot. Yeah. So we're not doing any flocculants or coral snow at the moment anymore. No, no.
Sturgis Reef is wondering any phyto, and I'm assuming that means live phyto. You did mention you're using some sort of concentrate, right?
Yeah, we use a concentrated phyto, which comes in frozen cubes. I don't know what that's also not written on the package what kind of phyto it is, but it's a bright green cube. So we do feed phyto every day, but it's obviously not alive anymore. But I think it's still consumable by the microlife in the tank, alive or not. But of course, it will decay pretty fast. So we do add phyto every day, but not in a live form. No.
What about in terms of dealing with nuisance algae, cyanobacteria, all the stuff that can drive people crazy in terms of nuisance stuff in the in the tanks, reef tank. What's your what would be your advice to folks that are dealing with those sorts of issues? Let's talk about cyano first.
Um, First of all, don't freak out and don't start to do 10 things at the same time. As long as it's not life threatening for the tank, just
Ride it out.
make a cup of coffee and sit back and just first think about it, and then just make a list of possible causes and just address one at a time. So don't start doing 10 things at the same time. Um, in the case of cyano, I would just try to take it out. Just take a hose, suck it out, and see if it comes back. Well, in some cases, it doesn't come back actually. Well, if it does come back, then first check your flow. Okay, change the flow, suck it out again, wait a few more days. So if you want to actually learn something or improve your reef keeping skills, you really have to address one thing at a time and see what kind of effect it has on whatever issue you have. And that's the only way you can connect the dots at some point. So in case of cyano, it can be flow related, maybe in some cases dissolved nutrients, so nitrate or phosphate levels. Um, and in many cases, there's just one spot in a tank that cyano always pops
Yeah.
up when I don't know, when over here when winter ends, when it becomes spring, a lot of people have cyano all of a sudden. So it's also not something you should stress about too much. Same for other green algae. Just try to manually remove it, see if it comes back. If it does come back, try to get a fish or a snail or anything else that will eat it. Try to address the nutrients again. So a very methodology. Yeah, just try to
Methodical.
do things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
try to do things step by step, and yeah, address the issue that way.
What about the use of chemicals? Are you an advocate of using chemicals in a dire situation, or do you not like to use those kind of band-aids?
Well, the thing is, cyano is not really a really threatening thing for your reef tank, unless it's so severe that it really smothers
Yeah.
all the corals. But in that case, I think you can better start over, maybe in some cases. No, I'm not a big advocate of those substances because you don't really address the issue.
Right.
I think it's mentioned many times before. It will come back at some point if you don't take away the root cause. So no, I'm not an advocate of those products. Same for you had a couple of products, I think a couple of years ago, that were combating green algae. but in the end, it also wasn't very beneficial for the rest of your inhabitants. So no, I would never use those, but try to find a natural predator or try to find the root cause of the issue, and deal with it for good and not just for a couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think unless you can find what is causing it, if you nuke the tank with some sort of thing that's going to kill the cyano, then if you haven't figured out what's causing the cyano, eventually common sense says to me that it's going to come back unless you're fine using that chemical treatment every few months, which we don't know what the long-term impact's going to be and using antibiotics like that on a regular basis. So that can kind of get down a slippery slope.
Yeah, at some point it will probably come back and the remedy doesn't work anymore.
Right.
They have a bigger
built
issue.
up resistance to the tank. So how you feeling there, Leo? Can you go on for a little bit longer there? Are you ready to?
Yeah. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Yeah.
So we got a lot more coral stuff to go through here. Let's talk about 4705. This one looks familiar to me, like the bleeding tree.
Let me check.
4705. That what?
Yeah, I don't have any. You say bleeding tree, but I don't even know. I think this one is not even online. I don't even didn't even sell any frags of these.
Somebody watching just dropped it. I can't recall the name of this coral. It looks very familiar to me in terms of one of the common named corals here in the U.S. But striking, man.
Oh, yeah, this is the thick branch that you show now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Acropora abrotenuides.
Yeah.
Abrotenuides. I don't think is there actually a fancy name for it? I don't think it's sold that much in aquaculture actually, because when you frag this coral, typically it will go dormant for at least half a year.
Isn't that frustrating?
Those frags will stop growing immediately, and if you're lucky, after half a year, a new growth tip will pop up. But it's not a very ideal coral to aquaculture. So we have a big colony in one of the tanks, which is super nice, especially when it's a little bit bigger. But it's not the most ideal coral to frag and sell. No.
It is gorgeous, though. So that's not is that, would you call that a challenging coral, given the slow growth rate in terms of frags, or is that just a slow grower? I guess a slow grower is a challenging coral, because I always say that if a coral is growing slow, a lot can happen to that coral over time.
Yeah.
So and that basically makes it a challenging coral.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, when you cannot take frags and put them in different system or different locations in your tank. If you only have that one colony that's also growing really slow, it's for many reasons very vulnerable to some sort of some sort of accident, or if it's not in the right location or a little bit shaded or a little bit out of proper flow, and it dies, it's just gone. But this coral is not very difficult when it's acclimated properly, but it requires a lot of light and a lot of heavy flow. But if you give it a lot of flow and light, and if it's acclimated well, it will do pretty well. But it's still a very, very slow grower. Yeah.
All right, 4510. This is that's a gorgeous. It's got those purple tips, and it looks like greenish yellow polyps.
Yeah, that's again some sort of confetti or grape ape. If you, I think we have 3, 4, 5 different types of confetti corals, all with these very distinguished thin branching shape, a little bit flat corallites, and those very long wavy polyps. So this is a little bit different from the previous one that you saw, a little bit different color tips, also a little bit more green polyps. It's I have to say, it's all those moving Acropora with those long polyps, like Millipora, but also these corals are very popular with hobbyists. First of all, they grow very quickly. They're very brightly colored. They're also not very hard to color up, and yeah, because they grow so fast, they're also relatively affordable to acquire.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So, Leo, what would you say would be your favorite type of acro? Millies, tenuous, smooth skin.
Well, staghorns, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but
I wasn't paying attention.
No. But
besides stags,
yeah, I think Acropora latistella is a favorite of mine. I know Adam also gave that answer, but I think the latistella Acropora is very versatile in coloration, and I really like those thin spiny branches. But I also like, obviously, the Millipora a lot. Also because they come in so many colors, varieties. Yeah, and it's just if it becomes larger, it's just such a beautiful shape. The big tables with all those moving polyps. It's very hard to beat.
I'm with you, man. Millies are probably my favorite because of what you're just talking about in terms of the colors and the movement of the polyps. 4507. 4507. This looks like almost like a tabling acro. It's got the pink corallites and the red polyps. Got some green in the base.
I have to wait. 4507.
Yeah, almost like a rose vine table type. I think that's something that Adam at Battle Corals sells. I can't recall if that's exactly what.
Yeah, I have no idea what this one. We haven't sold this one yet, so I didn't give it a fancy name. But I also don't have a proper scientific ID for this yet. But yeah, it's. I really like the combination of the light baby blue color with the some sort of pink red corallites. Or polyps. It's a very interesting combination. You don't see it a lot. It's in it's actually in system 3, so in one of the grow out tanks. We didn't cut any frags of it yet, but I think when we start to move everything upstairs, we will definitely snag a few frags and offer them online for sure.
Yeah, that's a sweet looking acro. All right.
Yeah.
4937. It looks like what we're looking at here is some millies, some kind of like yellow millie in the center.
Yeah, some sort of green millie in the center, and then on top there's a couple of millies, and on the bottom right are some tenuis.
Yes.
Some different tenuis, a little bit pinkish corallites with green polyps, and some sort of blue, lila, pinkish with gold green polyps.
Do people go nuts for tenuis over in Europe, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but they tend to really want those fancy names. So the Home Wrecker and the Walt Disney, real or not. But if you offer any other, I offer quite a lot of, I think, beautiful colored tenuis with really multicolored, orange polyps, green body, and blue tips, for instance. They are popular, but I think they are as nice as a home wrecker, but they don't carry that name. So they're immediately less wanted. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a name game after all. But tenuis are still quite popular, but people tend to really go for those collector names in many cases.
What's your favorite tenuis?
Well, my favorite tenuis is the Avatar tenuis, which I gave it the name myself. It's not in the batch of photos that you have, but if you Google it, you will find it quite quickly. So it's basically red polyps, greenish base, and blue tips.
Not a bad combo.
Yeah, so it's a very nice coral, and it looks nice under whites, so under full spectrum, as well as under blues. And I think for a lot of those very fancy high-end tenuis, they only look good under blues in most cases. Yeah. But this is actually one that looks good under both.
Nice.
So I think that's why I like it a little bit more than some others. Yeah.
4839. That looks like a kick-ass orangey. That looks like a splice Millipora there.
Yeah, it's not a splice, but the inside of well, it's not a colony, right? It's like a big frag, but deeper inside those branches, the color turns very bright neon green, and the tips are super orange. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's not really sunset millie, but it's maybe a little bit comparable to a sunset millie. But yeah, this is a very good example why Millipora are so awesome, because when you see this in real life, you see those polyps, those bright green polyps with the orange base. Yeah, it's really amazing.
What? And that's not a spliced millie or a no. Wow.
No. So it's one solid color. It's just that the base of the color will turn a little bit greener, and the tips will turn a little bit more orangey.
Do you mind if I ask, what do you guys get for a frag of that?
What do I charge?
Yeah. You don't have to answer that question.
Well, this coral actually acquired. This piece I acquired from another hobbyist. So this definitely wasn't fragged immediately, but for let's say a 2-3 inch frag of this, I would charge around 70 to 80 euros.
Wow.
Which I think in dollars, is it a 1-on-1 ratio or not really?
That's
right?
a bargain, man.
Well, that's the price point in Europe.
Wow.
People are not willing to pay any cent more than that.
Really? So like high-end frags, what's the most you charge for like a higher end, more rare type of frag?
Well, it doesn't have those fancy names. If I stick Homewrecker or Walt Disney to it, I can easily charge 500 euros.
Gotcha.
But I don't do that. First of all, because I don't have the real stuff.
Yeah.
Second of all, I don't want to scam people. But for a very nice tenuis, like I showed you before, the Avatar tenuis, the price is around 129, 139 euros. That's as high as I can get. Otherwise, I won't sell anything.
I think I'm going to make a trip to the Netherlands and
yeah, you should
come back with a little care package there.
Yeah. I think the market for aquacultured corals in the US is much more mature than over here, because over here you can still buy a mariculture colony for roughly the same price as you would buy a aquacultured frag. And still a lot of hobbyists are used to buying those mariculture colonies. And when you can get a whole colony for the same price as a small frag, not everyone sees the added value of aquaculture yet. So it's a challenge, and for us as businesses, we have to make it clear why aquaculture is actually a better choice.
Yeah, makes sense. This is pretty wicked. 4759. That's crazy, Leo. What I'm looking at right there, it's like
4759.
That's not photoshopped either, because I could see the egg crate and I could see the coralline.
You can see the egg crate. Yeah,
there's nothing going on there. You're not messing with these photos here. So
no. Yeah, this is a piece also acquired this size. I was cherry picking from an Australian shipment, which are like 300-400 corals, all laid out. And I saw this very small, branch. It's not more than a small branch lying around, and it was under white lights. We're picking the corals not under blues, but that wholesaler only has white light. So I just really liked the shape. I thought, okay, this looks very different than could be like Latistella, maybe Speciosa kind of, but it didn't have these colors at all. So I put it after quarantine, put it in the tank, and it developed these, very multicolored colors. It's crazy. I do have to say, I moved it upstairs now, and it lost most of these colors immediately. So, yeah, I think it needs some time to get those colors back. But it's one of our best corals, actually. Yeah.
Bert said
amazing.
it's a dropper. I guess he's talking about jaw dropper, which could be the name he's talking about, or just it's your jaw drops when you see that.
Maybe both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 4934. That looks like a tenuous. It's got
4934.
blue. Blue tips, orange.
It's
polyps.
a pretty standard tenuous. So green base, blue tips, sometimes a hint of pink in the coral lights, but not a lot. But I just wanted to show how healthy and how fast growing tenuous can actually be if they're really happy. As you can see, this branch is full of new offspring, new branches, new axial tips coming out. And if a tenuous is aquacultured and pest-free, in many cases it's a very quick and good grower, and not as sensitive as a lot of people experience from time to time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
4515. 4515.
4515. Yeah. Yeah, this is obviously a blue light photo for sure. But very nice specimen. Bright yellow. This is really yellow, not green, but yellow. And the tips, the color of the tissue on the tips is a little bit blue. Also on the full spectrum. So it's also a little bit different than we normally see. I think we called it the blue Wolverine.
Yeah, I was going to say,
you have to come up with
it looks
something.
like a Wolverine.
Yeah.
Based on what, or even a Pink Floyd. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. But the tips are a little bit more blue, so we thought, okay, let's call it blue Wolverine, and let's go for that one. Yeah.
And the last one I got here, I picked out was 4842. So it's just a bunch of frags that look pretty sweet. It looks like there's a bunch of I see a couple of it's like Millipora in there.
Yeah. There's some Millipora, there's some tenuis, there's some Selagos in there, some Valida on top. And in the bottom there's some sort of Joe Mango type. Yeah. This is for sure a filter photo. So this is definitely not under white light only. I don't have that nice corals, but this is a filter shot. But it's still, this is typically the stuff that we offer. So this is roughly the size and the quality that we offer for, I think, a reasonable price. And in this case, some of the frags are actually grown onto the onto the plate already. Between the photography and the shipping, sometimes there's like 2, 3, 4 weeks in between, and those corals will just keep growing.
That's a good that's a good thing to have. What about Spatulata? Do you get a lot of those? Do you have any of those in your collection?
We tried quite a lot in the past.
They're tough, right? They're tough corals to keep.
Yeah, long term they're very, very hard to keep. And also if you make a frag like the Abutanoides I talked about earlier, if you make a frag of that, it goes dormant very often. It takes a long time for it to grow again. And we always want to sell frags that are actively growing. So they need to have active growth tips before we really want to sell them. So we don't sell a frag that's basically dormant or doesn't have any axial tips. So yeah, we stopped with Spatulata altogether. First of all, they're very hard to keep, and second of all, they're very hard to frag. So we don't do it anymore.
Gotcha. All right, so Leo, it is approaching 2:30 in the morning in your time, so we're gonna let you go. But I want to ask you one more question, kind of a final question for you. If you had to pass along the top 3 tips for folks out there that are trying to up their Acropora SPS game, what would those 3 tips be?
First of all, keep it simple. Go back to the basics first and start building from there very slowly. Second of all, don't go for the fancy names. At least not immediately. Go for a nice staghorn, go for a nice tort, gain some experience with those, and then go for the high-end tenuis.
Milka Stylo. That's great coral.
Yeah, that's the best. Third, just have the basics in check. Good light, good flow, good parameters. And then most acros are not that hard to keep. And if I may add one more thing, just keep your tank pest free, because you can acquire a big collection of Acropora. You can have a great tank full with acros, full with colonies. And if you get a pest in your tank, which I think any of us experienced in the past, then all of your hard work is gone within months. And in most cases, you basically have to start over. So I want to try to save you that experience and just go for pest-free corals as much as you can. And if you're not sure, try to quarantine everything you buy.
That's good advice.
So there were 4, but I think that's enough to keep the acros.
Yeah, no, awesome advice. Well, Leo, man, thank you so much for taking the time and staying up so super late to join us tonight.
It was my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Got a lot out of it. So I want to just thank you on behalf of everybody that was tuning in. Appreciate you spending the time with us, man.
Thanks, Keith, for having me. And I hope you all enjoyed it. And maybe talk to you later.
Yeah. Definitely would love to have you come back on at some point down the line. So again, thanks to Leo for being on the live stream. I also want to thank both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for being sponsors and supporting the show. Also want to thank all you out there for tuning in and contributing via the super chat conversation. Also, big thank you to Paul, who is the moderator as well as the president of the Boston Reefer Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. Also want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be on Tuesday, November 14th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is going to be a very special episode, a tribute show for Jake Adams. Scheduled guests include Chris Meckley, Matt Peterson, Vincent Chalias, Julian Sprung, Windsor Adams, perhaps Reef Adams might make an appearance. Mark Vanderwall, Chris Carney, Rob Moogie, Sanjay Yoshi, Mike Paletta, Joe Capriata, and Luke Adams, Jake's brother. So if you want to check out the full upcoming schedule of guests, visit reefbum.com under the YouTube section. Until next time, be safe and be well. Later.